Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Shabbos Af Kuf Lametes. We are two lines from the top, says the Gemara Tanya. Rabbi Yossi ben Elisha Omer, Imra Isa Dor, if you notice a generation should sorrows rabbis boys alav, that many misfortunes befall this generation, say ubdoi, go and examine the Dayana Yisrael amongst the judges, the Dayanim of Klal Yisrael, and see if they are corrupt, if they are conducting their dinim with integrity and honesty. Shekol pur'ana shabala olam, because all misfortunes which befall the world leiba ela b'shvil Dayana Yisrael only come on account of the corrupt Dayanim of Klal Yisrael, and indeed that must be the reason why there are tzaras befalling this generation. Shanemar Shimona Zois Roshei Beis Yaakov. Listen to this: the heads of Klal Yisrael, of Katzine Beis Yisrael, the officers of Yisrael, Hamitavim Mishpat, who abhor justice, Beis Kol Yishara Yakeshu, all straightforwardness, all straight. They go ahead and they make crooked, they corrupt. Boinei Tzion Bedamim, build Yerushalayim with blood, Yerushalayim ba'avla, and they build Yerushalayim with wickedness. Roshea b'sheichad yishpoitu, her heads judge through bribery. V'koyanea b'mechir yoiru, and her koyahanim, this is referring to Yerushalayim, the koyahanim Yerushalayim, they are yoiru, they issue their rulings b'mechir, through payment. They paid off Unvi'eha and her prophets, her Navim, Bekesav Yiksoimu. They foretell, they do their prophecy with Kesef. They're all paid off. Val Hashem Yish'anu, nevertheless they rely on Hashem, Yish'enu, Rishayimhem. They are wicked, Ela Shatolu B'tchoinam. They are dependent, B'misha Amar V'Ya'olam. They depend on Hashem. The pasuk concludes that they say, well, we rely on Hashem, Hashem is amongst us. We have nothing to be worried about. No misfortune will befall us. So on account of these averas, since the Kohanim, the judges, the Nevi'im are all paid off with bribery and payment, as a result, Hashem brings retribution, brings upon them Gimel Puranius, three misfortunes, Keneged Gimel Averis Shabiyadam, which correspond to the three averas which they were committing. Shanemar. These are the three misfortunes. Lochein beglalchem tzion tzadeh techaresh. As a result of what you do, Yerushalayim will be plowed like a field. V'Yerushalayim in tia will be heaps of ruins. V'harabais lebamis yar, like a forest. So Rashi explains these are the three puranios: the tzadeh techrash, in tia, and lebamis yar, which are connected, corresponding midah connected midah. Those three averos. The shoichad, the judges, and the kohanim, and the prophets, who are all bribed and paid off. The Gemara says that Hashem will only rest His Shechina Klal Yisrael ad sheyichlu shoiftim v'shoitur mroim Yisrael, until the wicked judges and officers will be eliminated from Klal Yisrael. Shenemar v'yoshivo yodai olayich, I will restore my hand, Yadi alayich, on you, ve'esroif kabor sigoyich, I will clarify, cleanse, like with soap, sigoyich, your impurities, ve'asiru kol b'diloyich, I'll remove your impurities, ve'shiva sheftayich ve'rishoyna, and I will restore your judges, like the days of old, ve'yotzayich kevatchila, and your advisors, like the olden days. And the pasuk concludes that afterwards, after the shoftim will be restored, the proper judges will be reinstated. Afterwards, the kor l'chayat tzedek ne'amana, and Rashi says this indicates the return of the Shechina. Now, Rashi points out that the Rishayim we spoke about earlier, they relied on Hashem, the beteach b'Hashem, and the Gemara says that's why Hashem brings upon them these three misfortunes. Now, how do these things go hand in hand? Because the beteach and Hashem, they get these retributions. So he says that, technically speaking, as a result of their corrupt judgments, etc., they should bring about the destruction, the entire destruction of the world, because we know that this world is meant to follow a certain system. Hashem wanted to allocate everybody, every person has his possessions, his money, everything is meant to be allocated with a very specific system. Hashem organized His world in a very specific way. And this whole system is maintained by judges who conduct things properly and honestly, follow the laws of Hashem, thereby allocating the resources to each individual according to what is destined for him. But if they go ahead and they corrupt their dinim, and they misuse and abuse their authority, and misallocate resources throughout the world, they are bringing about the destruction of the world. The whole system is in disarray. So really this should result in the whole world being destroyed. Nevertheless, on account of their bitachon Hashem and that merit, Hashem minimizes the Puranas, doesn't absolutely destroy the world, but brings about 3 Puranias as we described earlier. Continues the Gemara, Amar Ula, Ein Yushalayim Nifte. Some have a gear say, Ein Yisrael Nifte Ela B'Tzedakah, Shenemar, Tzion B'Mishpat Tipada, Tzion will be redeemed with justice, V'Shaveh B'Tzedakah, its returnees, meaning Klal Yisrael, will have their redemption on account of the schus of tzedakah. Tzedakah is a very powerful tool to bring about the geula. Omar of Papa Ibatli Yihiri are those arrogant ones amongst Klal Yisrael. If they become eliminated, then as a result of that, Batli Amagushi, the priests who missionarize, who go ahead and they try to incite Klal Yisrael, remove them from the service of Hashem through their lies and deception. So they will become eliminated as a result of the arrogant amongst us ceasing to exist. Ibatli Dayani, if these corrupt judges will be eliminated and cease to exist, Batli Gezirfati, those agents of the authority, of the government who come harass us, they will become eliminated as well. How do we see this? Ibatli Hiri Batamagushi, if the arrogant amongst us will stop, will cease to exist, the Amagushi, those priests who incite us, will also cease to exist. The pasuk says, I will cleanse like with soap, sigayach. Rashi says, it's a lashon of yiske ma'oid, the great ones, the arrogant, the haughty ones amongst us, if they will be cleansed from us. The pasuk continues, Avasiro kol b'dilayach, I will remove all the b'dilayach. Rashi says b'dilayach is those goyim who they separate, they make a hevdel, a partition. They separate us, they're mavdel. They mavdel us from Hashem, so Hashem will remove them on account of the haughty ones amongst us who will cease to conduct themselves in their manner. Ibatli dayani, if the corrupt judges are batal and they stop doing what they're doing, Ibatli gezirfati, the authorities will stop harassing us. Hashem mishpatayich, Hashem will remove the corrupt judges. Pana oiveich, will cleanse, will remove your enemies. Amar of Maloi Mishum Rabbi Lezer Shimon. How do we explain the pasuk? Shavar Hashem mati rishayim shevet mishlim. Hashem broke the stick, the staff of wicked ones, the shevet, the rod, mishlim of rulers. Shavar Hashem mati rishayim seems to be referring to not the rishayim themselves, but the mate, the authority that the rishayim base themselves upon and garner support from. So what is it referring to? Eloha dayanim. So the Rishonim are the corrupt judges. Shenasu makel lichazneim. So the dayanim here, or actually, Rashi says they're actually good dayanim, but they go ahead and on their own they're really not doing anything wrong, but they go ahead and they are makel lichazneim. They become like a stick, like a staff to their officers. So their officers are the ones who are really the corrupt ones, and they're the ones that are really the Rishonim. So Mati Rishonim, just for clarity again, Mati Rishonim means that the Dayanim are serving the Rishonim. Who is the Rishonim? Not the Dayanim themselves, it is the Chazonim, the Shamashim, the officers of the courts, who are out to make some money, and they go ahead and they approach the litigant. They say, listen, we're not going to summon your opponent until you pay us off. We're not going to collect money for you until you pay us off. So those are the corrupt officers, the Chazonim, and the Dayanim support them. They back them. And therefore, they're considered to be the Makel for the Chazonim. And the Pasuk says, Shabar Hashem Mata Rishayim, Hashem will broke the staff of the Rishayim. It's referring to the Dayanim, who support the Rishayim, support the officers in their misdeeds. The Pasuk concludes, Shabar Hashem Mata Rishayim, Shevet Moishlim. What is that? Shevet Moishlim Elo Talmidei Chachamim Shebimishpachos Hadayanim. So the shevet, the rod, once again the support, the authority for those corrupt judges are the Talmidei Chachamim, who are family members of these corrupt judges. and they support them. So the corrupt judges base their authority on the Talmid Chachamim who support them, and through them they carry out their corruption and misdeeds. Ma'azur Amar Elu Talmid Chachamim. The Shevet Moishlem is referring to the Talmid Chachamim Shemalamdim Hilchas Sibur L'Dayane Bur. It means like this, that the Dayane Bur, they're unqualified Dayanim. They're not really so scholarly, they're not really fit and suitable to be appointed as judges. But the Talmidei Chachamim, they go ahead and they vouch for them. They say, look, you can appoint them, you support their nomination, and they say, well, they're going to come to us for advice, for support, for instruction. Don't worry about it. Even if they're not so knowledgeable, they'll always come back and they'll receive instructions from us. Now, it turns out that ultimately those Dayanim, after their appointment, they don't bother checking with Talmid Chachamim and learning from them. They go ahead and they conduct their dinim, their court cases according to based on their ignorance, and this results in them corrupting their dinim. So this is the Shevet Moishlim and Talmid Chachamim, on whose authority these Dayanim were appointed, and this results in corruption. Amar Belezer ben Meloy Mishum Shlakish. My dichsiv. How do you explain the pasuk? Ki kapechem negalu b'dam. Your hands were sullied with blood. V'tzbeisechem. Your fingers ba'avoin with sin. Sivseisechem. Dibru sheker. Your lips spoke falsehood. L'shonchem. Your tongues avla sege utters wickedness. Explains the Gemara. Ki kapechem negalu b'dam. This is Elo Adayanim, the judges themselves who receive bribery. Why is bribery compared to blood? Explains Rashi. Because when a person takes one's money unjustifiably, it's as though he's taking his neshama. The Gemara Bava Kama says a person risks his life to earn his livelihood. He goes, he climbs up on a tree, and he endangers himself in order to earn parnasa. So in his money is really embedded, his whole life is in there. In addition to that, he can procure livelihood, food, etc. with money. So money is the closest to a person's life. It's as though he's taking his life away. So this is the pshat, that your hands are full of blood upon accepting bribery. And your fingers full of avain. Elu seifrei adayanim. The seifrim describes who author these false documents. Your lips uttered lies. Elu Dayanim. It's referring to those individuals who advise the litigants, the parties taking part in the Din Torah. They advise them, they instruct them on how to present their arguments. L'shonchem avla tege. Your tongue speak utter wickedness. Elu balei dinim. It's referring to the parties themselves, the litigants themselves, who present their cases with lies and falsehood. V'amar b'loi mishum Rabbi Yitzchak Magdala. B'yom shepirish Yosef me'echav. From the day that Yosef HaTzadik left his brothers, lo tam tam yayin, he didn't even partake in a little bit of wine, the chsiv l'kotka dinizir echav, referring to Yosef as a nazir. So he refrained from drinking wine just as a nazir does. Rabbi Yosef Chanina Amar, af hein, lo tam tam yayin. The brothers likewise, the shvatim, did not taste wine from that day and on, the chsiv, as it says when they finally met him, vayishtu vayishkru imoy. They didn't know who he was yet, but they were sitting with him and they drank wine and they got intoxicated with him. Apparently, up until this moment, this was not the case. So they hold, Rabbi Yosef Chanina holds that this applied to the Shvatim as well, as opposed to the first Shita, who held that this only applied to Yosef himself. V'idach, so the first Shita holds that no, it only applies to Yosef, but the brothers did actually taste wine. Shichur sud lo yahava. The pasuk here is speaking about intoxication. They weren't shikorim beforehand, but shtia meyahava. But even before that day, they would drink wine. So the point apparently here is that they refrained from wine on account of their teshuvah, their distress, on account of what happened with Yosef, and he likewise refrained from wine to empathize with their situation, to take part in their distress, and therefore he also maintained abstinence from wine. V'amar maloi b'schar. in the merit of v'racha v'samach b'liboy. This was when Moshe Rabbeinu was sent by Hashem, appointed by Hashem to be a shliach, to be a leader of Klal Yisrael, to go to Paray, to take the Eden out of Mitzrayim. Moshe Rabbeinu was concerned that perhaps this is going to evoke jealousy in his brother's heart. Aaron HaKohen, who was actually older than Moshe, not only that, he had a Gili Shechina, revelation of Shechina prior to Moshe Rabbeinu. So he was concerned about that, and Hashem reassured him, don't worry, when Aaron will see you, v'racha v'samach b'libi, he will actually have joy in his heart. And on account of that in fact, Aaron HaKohen, when he saw Moshe Rabbeinu, he wasn't jealous at all. He was actually happy for him. Go ahead, we both have our respective missions in this world. We're both meant to do what we're supposed to do. We're sent by Hashem to do our job. There's no reason to have jealousy. He was actually happy for his younger brother. He wasn't just displaying it, but he was v'racha v'samach b'liboy, in his heart, internally. He shared. He had an expression of joy. So on account of that, Zocha l'choshen hamishpat alivi, he was zeichet to have the choshen hamishpat, one of the big day kahuna, placed on his heart. Continues the Gemara. Sholchule b'nei Bishkar. Bishkar was a location, a town. So the residents of Bishkar sent Levi. They sent to Levi 3 halacha questions. Kilo mau, may one erect a canopy on Shabbos. Kishusa bekarma mau, may one plant kishusa, hops, in a vineyard. Is there a concern of confusion of kalayim? Are hops considered like a vegetable, which would not allow it to be planted in a kerem for concern of kalayim, or is it considered like a tree? So the Mepharshim explained that this type of plant actually does not have any roots in the ground, so it's questionable how to approach it. Is it deemed like a vegetable and there is kalayim in a kerem, or like a tree and there's no concern of kalayim? The third question was mace b'yomtiv mao. Can one bury a mace on Yom Tov? So he had 3 questions, and they sent it to Levi. Ada Ozel nachnafshi Levi. When the emissary, the shliach, by the time he got to the place of Levi, Ada Ozel nachnafshi de Levi. Levi had already passed away. Omar Shmuel Rav Menashe. So Shmuel turned to Rav Menashe and he said, Ich hakimas, if you are wise enough, shalachlu, go respond to their questions. Shalachlu, so he responded as follows. Regarding the question of kila, the canopy, chazarnu al kol tzidei kila. We have investigated all the different aspects of kila, v'lo motzina lo tzad heter. We have not found any possible heter, any way to permit erecting a canopy on Shabbos. Says, well, why not? V'lishlachlu, why couldn't he send them that they can do a specific type of canopy? Kiduram bar Yecheskel. This was the one with the strings attached to it. As we learned earlier, there's no concern of spreading this out because he's merely adding to a temporary oil. So why didn't he inform them of this option? Says the Gemara, Lefi she'enon bnei Torah, because they were not Torah-oriented people, they weren't bnei Torah. And he was concerned if he's going to grant them allowances, perhaps they're going to stretch it further and apply the heter to other situations, even though it is unjustified. So therefore, he prohibited. Regarding the second question, kshusa bekarma irvuva, planting the kshusa in a kerem is considered to be confusion and kalayim. Says the Gemara, why? Why couldn't he send them back in accordance with his shita, the view of Rabbi Tarfon, the Sanya kishus? What is the halacha of this type of plant? Rabbi Tarfon, it is not regarded as kalayim in a vineyard. He regards it as a tree. They say it's considered a vegetable, and therefore there is a concern of kalayim in a kerem. Now this halacha of kalayim b'kerem in Eretz Yisrael is minat Torah. In Chutz La'aretz is only midrabanan. V'kaimelan, and we have a tradition. We know this as a fact that kol hamekel ba'aretz. Whenever we have a lenient approach regarding these types of things like Arla and Kalaya Kerem in Eretz Yisrael, where over there it is a minat Torah because these are mitzvahs hatluyis ba'aretz, which are inherently connected to the ground, Eretz Yisrael. So whenever we have a lenient view regarding those halachas in Eretz Yisrael, halacha k'maisa b'chutz la'aretz, we follow that view, although not in Eretz Yisrael because over there it's minat Torah, but we follow that kula in chutz la'aretz. So why couldn't they plant the kishas in the kerem in accordance to Rav Tarfon's shita? Since they were in chutz la'aretz, we went to follow the lenient approach. Says the Gemara, Vishain of Bnei Torah, because the not Bnei Torah is concerned about allowing things lest they stretch it further. Machriz Rav, So Rav announced, Haiman the boy Mizra. Whoever would like to plant Kishus Bakarim or Lizra, he can go ahead and plant the Kishus and the Karim without any concern. Rav Amram Chasida, Mangedilavei, he would apply lashes, he would punish one who would plant the Kishus and the Karim, even in Chutzlars. Tosis points out, apparently, he was speaking about a place which was not B'nai Torah, and therefore he wanted to limit things. Rav Mesharsha would do as follows. Yov le pruta letina knachri. He would give a pruta, type of coin, letina knachri, to a non-Jewish child, v'zarle, and the guy would plant it for him. Shirashi explains that he, in principle, Rav Mesharsha, in principle held that it is mutter, but he wanted to apply restrictions, limitations, so that other people, observers, will not go ahead and this will not lead them to apply unnecessary, unjustified leniencies. Therefore, he wanted to apply restrictions, and he did it through a Nachri Tinek. Why couldn't he give it to a Jewish child? Because the child might become grow accustomed to growing the Kishas and the Kerem. It's done year after year. So it's something which he might get accustomed to, and he might do it even after he becomes an adult. Why couldn't he give it to a Nachri adult? Why do you have to seek a child? It might be confused with a Yisrael Gadol. Therefore, he wanted to keep it 2 steps away from the Yisrael Gadol. Instead of giving it to the Nachri Gadol, he gave it to the Nachri Tinek. Regarding the third question of mace, which they wanted to know, can one bury a mace on Yom Tov Shalach Lahu? So he responded, no. Mace lo yisaskubay. They should not get involved in it. Lo Yudoin, not Jewish people, lo Amar, nor Gentiles, lo Yom Tov Rishon, not on the first day of Yom Tov, lo Yom Tov Sheni, not on the second day of Yom Tov as well. Eini, is that the case? That one may not bury? For Omar of Yudah Bar Shilas, Omar of Asi, Uvdahava, there was an incident with a mace, with a knishta, in the Beis HaKnesses, the Moin of this town, Moin, B'Yom Tov HaSamach Shabbos, which was on a Yom Tov, which was fell out next to Shabbos. I'm not certain whether Imel Faneh, whether the Yom Tov was before Shabbos, Imel Achareh, or the Yom Tov actually was following Shabbos, as Rashi explains. Let's see Rashi inside. A top line in Rashi, Imel Faneh, I'm not sure if Imchal Yom Tov be'erev Shabbos, if it fell out on Erev Shabbos, and he passed away on that day, since they knew that there will be no way to involve themselves with him tomorrow on Shabbos, therefore they allowed to bury him through Gentiles. So I'm not sure if that was the story, or whether it took place after Shabbos. Shabbos, he already died the previous day on Shabbos. Since he already delayed, he was lying around by Masriach, and it exuded an unpleasant smell. So on account of the Bizayan, they allowed. So getting back to the Gemara, I'm not sure exactly if it was before or after Shabbos. In any case, and the approach of Yochanan, and he told him, so Gentiles, Goyim, may go ahead and bury him. Likewise, V'amar Rava, mace b'Yom Tov Rishon. What about a mace on the first day of Yom Tov? Yisaska by Aramin. Gentiles can go ahead and bury him. B'Yom Tov Sheni. If there's a mace around on the second day of Yom Tov, then Yisaska by Yisrael. Even Yidden can go and bury him. Even if it is the second day of Rosh Hashanah, which is generally regarded as one and the same, the first and second day of Rosh Hashanah are regarded as like one unit. Nevertheless, when it comes to a mace who is present on that day, we treat it like a ordinary second day Yom Tov, and they can bury him. Mashenkim a beitza, this halacha does not apply to a beitza. So this is speaking about an egg which was laid on Yom Tov. We know that one may not eat a beitza shenolda b'Yom Tov. Now, what if there are 2 days of Yom Tov, first and second day of Yom Tov, next to each other, and their beitza was laid on the first day? The Gemara tells us, this is a Gemara leaving Gemara Rosh Hashanah, that he can go ahead and eat it on the second day Yom Tov. Why? Because the 2-day Yom Tov observation is merely on account of an uncertainty. So one day is the real one day is not. So either way you can eat the egg which was laid yesterday on Yom Tov, because if yesterday is the real Yom Tov and today is a weekday. If yesterday was a weekday and today is the Yom Tov, so this egg was born on a weekday, in which case there's no Isser. So this is halacha applied to a general 2-day Yom Tov, which in one day, which we consider one day to be an uncertainty. As opposed to Rosh Hashanah, we treat them both as definite days, as one long day, and therefore we don't say, well, if the egg was laid yesterday, you can eat it today. No, we regard them as one Kedusha, and we do not allow, we don't apply any suffix here, and we don't allow eating this egg, as opposed to the halacha of mace, where we apply leniency even on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so pertaining to our case here, we see that there are options of burying a mace on Yom Tov. So why did he respond to them in the absolute manner? He cannot go ahead and bury the mace first or second day Yom Tov, nor through Yisrael, nor through Akum. Says the Gemara, Lefisha ain't a Bnei Torah, because they were not Bnei Torah, and he was concerned that perhaps they're going to apply leniencies when it is unbased and unjustified. So in summary, we have the three cases we discussed. The Kila, the Gemara tells us you can go ahead and spread a canopy if it has a Chutu Meshicha. This was Allah of Ram Bar Yecheskel. Regarding the Kishus and the Kerem, the Gemara says in Chutzlars, one may plant it. According to one opinion, he needs to use a Tinei Knachri. Regarding a mace who is around in Yom Tov, if it is the first day Yom Tov, you can use Amamin, Goyim to bury him. On the second Yom Tov, even Yisrael can bury him. The Gemara says that he does not allow all these things for the Bnei Bishkar because they were not Bnei Torah. Continues the Gemara. Omar Rav Abin, Bar Rav Huna, Omar Rav Choma Bar Gurya. Mis'atev Adam, B'kila, Ube Kaskesea. So Kila is his canopy material. So he goes ahead and he wraps himself with his canopy, Ube Kaskesea, together with its straps. V'yoyte l'shus rabim b'Shabbos. He can go out in this manner to Shus Rabim on Shabbos, and he has absolutely no concern, because he's wearing it like a garment, like a malbush, despite the fact that there are straps there. Now, what is the point of those straps? To adjust, to spread out the canopy. Now, when he's using it as a garment, those straps are not currently in use, they're not functioning. Nevertheless, they're deemed to be part of this garment. It's not as though he's carrying a load. It's batal to the beged. Says the Gemara, why is this different than the halacha Rav Huna? The Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav hayoytze betalis she'ena mitzuyes kilchasa b'Shabbos chayav chatas. If one should go out wearing a talis, a garment she'ena mitzuyes kilchasa, which has some tzitzis strings hanging from it, but is not valid, it's not halachically valid. It wasn't kilchasa. For instance, only 3 corners have tzitzis, and the 4th one awaits to be affixed. So we only have 3 corners, and the 4th one doesn't have a tzitzis, so it's not valid. And if he walks out to Shus Rabim wearing the salas with those partial tzitzis, chayav chatas, they're considered to be a load, since they're not in use, they're not functioning. So why is this different than the straps of that canopy, in which we allow him to wear those that strap with that canopy with these straps, despite the fact that those straps are not currently in use? Says the Gemara, there's a big difference. Tzitzis l'gabi talis chashivi v'loy batli. The tzitzis in regard to the talis are significant. They're not batal to the talis. They're not subordinate to the talis. Hani, as opposed to these straps of the canopy, loy chashivi, they're not significant. Ubatli, and they're batal to the talis. They're not regarded as a load. So what it means to say is like this: that the straps of the canopy, they're functional when the canopy is being used as a canopy. Those straps are fully functional. So although they're currently not in use, they're not functioning right now, but technically they're functional, so they're regarded as an inherent part of this garment. And they're not a load. They're batal to this material, as opposed to the tzitzis, which are inherently non-functional, because we only have a partial tzitzis affixed here. So now if it's just a random string hanging down, then this thing has no significance, it's batal, subordinate, we wouldn't reckon with it. But these tzitzis are chashiv, and since they're slated to be completed and to make them functional, so at this point they're considered to be merely a masri, a load, and therefore if one carries it on Shabbos with those tzitzis, he wears the talis with those tzitzis, which are non-functional tzitzis, they are considered to be a load, and he's chayav chatas. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rabba Bar Rav Huna. This is going back to the halach of the strainer. We learned earlier that one may not, according to the Rabbanan, one may not suspend a strainer, this material, this porous material, on top of a kli on Yom Tov. Why? Because it's considered to be uvdin the chayil. It's a derech of chayil. He's acting in a weekday manner. So the Gemara will tell us a chiddush. There's a case where you can do it even on Yom Tov. Marim Adam, a person can go ahead and pretend ala mashameres b'Yom Tov, to go ahead and use this in shameres litlas b'rimayim, So he puts it on his kli with a pretense for the using it for remind him to hang, remind him on it, pomegranates, v'terle v'shmarim. Although at the end of the day he's going and he's using it for shmarim, meaning he's putting through the sediment of wine, he's filtering it through this mishameres. So although that's really his intent, he can go ahead and be marim, he could pretend that his true intent is to suspend it for the sake of placing remind him on it. In which case, he is undoing the uvda dechel. The point of the weekday manner is, if he's doing it for the sake of shmarim, but if he goes and he pretends that he's doing it for the sake of remind him, it is not considered to be doing something as it's done during the weekdays. Omar Ravashi v'hu the talaber remind him, provided that he actually hung remind him on it. So he needs to demonstrate that intent and undo the ma'aseh chol. He needs to show that he's using it for remind him, and afterwards he can go use it to filter his shmar. So again, the point here is because it's a uvda dechel, he's doing a weekday act, but if he is first putting the remind him on it, he's demonstrating his intent, he's showing that he's misusing this strainer, he's using it, he's deviating from its intended use, and therefore there's no concern. Says the Gemara, why is it different from the halacha we find on the Brisa? Matil and shecher b'moed, one can go ahead and brew shecher beer b'moed on chalamoid l'tzorech hamoed if it is for the sake of Yom Tov, if he needs it for Yom Tov. Shaloi l'tzorech hamoed aser, but he may not do it for after Yom Tov use. Echad shecher tmarim, whether date beer, v'echad shecher sa'orim, barley beer. Now the chiddush is afapi sheyesh lehen yashan. Even if they have old stock sitting in the storeroom, he has plenty for Yom Tov, but he wants to save that for after Yom Tov. So we don't allow to make specifically for after Yom Tov. So you're going to do a trick. Marim v'shoysim min hachodesh. He can go ahead and employ a pretense that he really needs. So he's going to leave the storeroom closed up. He's going to leave his stock in storage, and he's going to go ahead and produce more beer and drink that on Yom Tov. This way he'll have full stock available after Yom Tov. So we see in this halacha that it's perfectly fine to brew beer and drink it on Yom Tov, even though he's employing it haram by pretense. He doesn't really need it. And when he's making this beer during the actual brewing process, is he demonstrating need? No. For all you know, he's just using it for after Yom Tov because he has a supply. Nevertheless, there's no requirement to demonstrate, to show intent that he actually needs it for Yom Tov. Why is this different than the strainer? In which case you obligate him to actually demonstrate, to publicize that he needs it for the tmar, for the remind him. You require him to place remind him on it to indicate his true intent. Why is this different than the beer, which is allowed even without demonstration? Says the Gemara, this difference. Hasam loy muchach hamilsa. Hacha muchach hamilsa. Over there by the beer, it's loy muchach hamilsa. It's not clear and evident that it's something improper. Why? Because the observer simply says he needs beer. Who knows what's going on in this person's private storeroom? Whether he really needs it, whether he doesn't. The actual act of brewing beer in itself is not an improper act. It's not evident that it's improper. And therefore, it's okay without actually demonstrating need. It's fine. Hacha, as opposed to our case of the strainer, mucha, it's evident, it's visible. It appears like something improper. It appears like he's spreading the strainer to strain with it. It's a weekday activity. It's uvda dechel. Therefore, he needs to undo that. He needs to be mafkia from that impression by doing something which demonstrates opposite kavana, a reverse intent, by placing the reminder on the strainer, in which case he is showing, look, I intend on using it for reminder, then he can go ahead and use it for the shmarim as well. So that's the difference between the strainer and the beer. Amar le Rabban Ravashi. So Rabban complained to Ravashi, Chazimar, did you see Haitzum Rabban, this young Talmud Chacham, Rav Huna Rav Chivon Shmei? So that was his name. Some say it was Rav Huna Rav Chilvan. That was his name, Shmei. The Shakal Bara de Tuma, that he took a clove of garlic. Umarach Barza the dam, he placed it inside the barza, the faucet, the leaking faucet of the dam of this barrel, which would be a Issa D'Rabbanan because it appears like he's being masaking, like he's fixing, he's repairing the leaking barrel. And he allowed himself to do it. Why? But Omar, he said, let's nuika machavna. I'm simply trying to store away the garlic. So he employed a pretense. How could he do that? That's the first thing he did. Number two, v'azal, he went v'noim. He took a nap in Maber in this ferry, waited for the non-Jewish captain to drive the ferry across the river. V'avar lachisa, and he traveled across, which is Isser Rabban. One may not travel on a Bon Shabbos. V'sir peri, so he went across the other side and took a stroll to inspect his vine, his grapes of his vineyard. V'amar, and he said, look, I did nothing wrong. Ano, l'meinam k'machavna. My kavanah is merely to take a nap, so I didn't do anything wrong. So they complained to Rav Ashi, how was he able to do these things? Amar Lu, Rav Ashi said, there's no problem. Harama kamris, or kamrisu. Are you speaking about employing a pretense? Harama b'drabbanani. This harama was in a context of Issa d'Rabbanan. So plugging up the hole in a barrel would be an Issa d'Rabbanan if he's using this garlic. Likewise, traveling across on this ferry would be Issa d'Rabbanan. And since he's doing it in a manner of pretense, that's okay. Now, generally speaking, we're careful. We don't want the general public to adopt these practices, because perhaps if you allow this, then they're going to do it even without a pretense. They're going to outright sit on a ferry, plug a barrel. But this person is a Talmud Chacham. When it comes to a Tzomar Rabbana, a young Talmud Chacham, there's no concern. He will not come to do lechatchila outright without employing a harama. So there's no concern there, and therefore, since he's doing a derech harama in a matter of pretense, he's taking this garlic and pretending that he's simply storing it there. He's taking a nap on the ferry. In this case, it is mutter. So in summary, we learned 4 cases of pretense. We began with a fellow who is being toiled the mishameres, hanging up the strainer on the kli. We said that's allowed, provided he's doing it for the sake of reminding, so he begins using it by putting pomegranates on it. So it appears like he's doing it for that purpose, and then he can remove the pomegranates and strain the shmarim through the strainer. Likewise, we learned about brewing beer on Cholamoid. He can do that, even though he has ample supply. So he ignores the supply, he makes fresh beer, and he drinks from it on Yom Tov. Once again, that's a harama, it's a pretense. But as the Gemara said, these 2 cases can be done because it's not nikar, it's not obvious that he's doing something improper. In the first case, since he puts the reminder there, he's indicating that's his intent. It doesn't appear like an ordinary weekday activity. Likewise, when it comes to brewing the beer, the observer, not necessarily does he know that he has a supply, so he's doing a perfectly legitimate act. He's brewing beer and drinking on Yom Tov. We have another 2 cases where the Gemara says this applies strictly to the Talmud Chacham. Placing the garlic inside the leaking faucet of his barrel, pretending that he's merely trying to hide it there. Likewise, going on this ferry, pretending that he's merely going to take a nap. So this is allowed, but the Gemara specified this is only for Talmud Chacham. Why? Because as opposed to the first 2 cases, where the pretense is clear and evident, it's a clear demonstration of his proper intentions. He's actually placing rimonim on the strainer. So it's clear and evident to all that there was a harama, a pretense employed, that he's doing it within the proper context. Likewise, brewing beer does not have any appearance of impropriety. So there's no concern there, as opposed to placing the garlic in the chavis, in which it can be interpreted one way or the other. It's not something which doesn't really have a clear demonstration. He's not demonstrating legitimate intent. He's claiming that he's doing latzniya, but it's not a clear-cut demonstration. Likewise, going to the ferry for a nap, pretending that he's going to take a nap, it can be interpreted one way or the other. It's not something which is a clear demonstration of legitimate intent, and therefore that is only allowed for a Talmud Chacham, who will maintain that and will not come to do it even without demonstrating legitimate intent, as opposed to an ordinary person, where there is a concern if we allow this, then perhaps he won't differentiate, he'll do these types of things even without demonstrating any legitimate intent. Continues the Mishnah. Noisnin mayim al gabi shmarim. One can place water, pour water al gabi ashmarim, on top of the wine sediment, which is sitting inside the strainer, b'shvil sheyitzaylu, so that they get clear, meaning the water which runs through the shmarim, inside the sediment, there's still some moisture, some wine embedded in there. the water will mix up with the shmarim and result in the wine inside the shmarim trickling through the strainer, and that's okay. Now, why is this different than the prohibition of filtering the shmarim into the strainer directly? Why is pouring water any different? The Mepharshim say because the water itself doesn't require any straining. It's perfectly suitable for drinking. So he's pouring this water into the shmarim which is in the strainer. He's creating some sort of mixture which is straining itself out. It's happening on its own. So he's creating a mixture which by itself strains itself out. Therefore, that is not considered to be an act of borer. Continues the Mishnah, one may go ahead and filter wine b'sudarim using pieces of material. So since he's doing it derech shinui, not in the conventional manner, it is mutter. Ubekfifa mitzvahs, or filtering it through a reed basket. V'noisen beitzo b'mesanen shachar, that one may place an egg inside a strainer containing mustard. The Gemara will explain the reason for this. V'oisen anunun b'Shabbos. One could go ahead and create this recipe, this beverage, even though it requires hard work. He can do it on Shabbos. Rabbi Doimer, it depends. But Shabbos b'kois. On Shabbos, only a small amount, a cupful. B'Yom Tov, he can do a bit more. B'Login, a bottle full of b'moyed, b'chavis, in a barrel. Rabbi Tzadok Oimer, hakol fi orchem. All depends on demand. How many guests showed up? The quantity depends on the orchem. Omar Ziri, noisin adam yayin solol, umayim tzlulin. One may filter. He can pour clear wine or clear water into a strainer b'Shabbos, and he has absolutely no concern. But if they're cloudy, then he cannot do that. The Ran explains that we're speaking about clear wine and clear water, which has some sort of sediment. That's why he's filtering it. But it is suitable to be drunk by most people. Most people don't hesitate to drink this. Therefore, even though he runs it through this filter, he's not doing boirer. He's not separating good from bad, because it's edible, it's drinkable as is. Therefore, there's no concern of boirer. Boirer means separating the psoilus and making something edible. Here it's perfectly suitable as is. So simply going and benefiting it a bit more, does not involve a malach. But if they're cloudy, in which case most people will hesitate to drink this. In this case, he's doing boirer because he's enabling it for use by separating the sediment, the psoila, so you cannot run it through a mishameres. Meisevei. So we have the kasha from Rav Shimon Gamliel. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer Turid Adam. One can go ahead and shake up chavish shal yain, a barrel of wine, yeino shmarel, it's wine together with its sediment, v'noisen l'sech hamishameres b'Shabbos, and run it through the strainer even on Shabbos. He has no concern. So apparently, there's no isser at all. When we're speaking about obviously wine, which technically can be drunk, but it's not something which most people would like to drink. It's not the derech for them to drink it. Nevertheless, it's still okay to run it through its strainer. Whereas the Iri insists that the only time this is allowed is if most people would drink it. Tirgum Ziri says the Iri interpreted this brisa ben agites shano. The halacha contained here, the allowance was ben agites, in between the wine presses. So in the time of the season, the grape crushing season, in which people don't hesitate to drink this cloudy wine, that's what's available, that's what's prevalent. So in that moment, during that time, during that season, if a cloudy wine is regarded as fully suitable, drinkable, and therefore he can go ahead and run it through a strainer. Continues the Gemara, so if we have wine which is a bit cloudy, and most people would actually hesitate to drink this, so you can't run it through a strainer, but he could run it through in a manner which is different. It's derech shinu, he's deviating from the conventional way of straining. For instance, through sudarim, pieces of material. Omar, shimi b'achia, u'b'levad, he must make sure, shelo yasaguma, that it doesn't create a cavity. So when he drops when he uses the material, he should make sure that no cavity is created there, in which he would direct the wine. Rashi says this is a derech of choil, the manner in which they do it during the weekdays, and therefore he must deviate. Likewise, you can use a kfifa mitzvahs, run this wine through a reed basket, which is also considered to be derech shinoi. So in summary, we learned that one may pour water through the shmarim, through the wine sediment, which is already present in the meshameres. That's okay, that doesn't involve boirer. Now the Ran categorizes our Gemara into three categories. He says like this: when we are speaking about water or wine, which is basically clear, most people wouldn't hesitate to drink it. That's the mayim and yain slulin that Ziri was referring to. Or in a case where, even when they're a bit cloudy, where generally most people hesitate to drink it, but it's bein agitos, during the wine press season, where people, again, don't hesitate to approach this beverage. So in this case, he's merely benefiting, he's adding benefit to something which is technically drinkable, and therefore he can even strain it through a regular strainer without any concern of boirer. But if this wine is somewhat cloudy, and it is not during the time of the wine press, in which case most people will hesitate to drink it. So it's only asur midrabanan to go and strain it, so therefore the Mishnah allows it to be done derech shinoi, like we just said, through a sudar, through a basket. But if this wine is achurim legamri, says the Ran, it's completely cloudy, nobody would touch it, it's considered to be off limits. In this case, straining it would involve a true malacha of boirer, because he's enabling it for use. He's actually fashioning and creating this wine by separating the pselos from it. In this case, it would be asur even to do a derech shinoi. Continues the Gemara, so getting back to the straining through a basket. Omer Rav Chiya bar Asher Marab Bolvad, you must make sure sheleyagbia, he shouldn't lift the kfifa mitzvahs, this basket. So he's straining the wine through it into a lower container. You shouldn't lift it off the bottom of the lower container. You shouldn't lift it off the floor of the lower container, because in which case he would be making an oil. Amarav, hi parvanka, parumka, this rag which they would cover the barrel with, apalgedu kubishari. If he only covers half the mouth of the barrel, that's okay. Akule kuba, if he covers the entire mouth of the barrel, asur, because he is making an oil. Now apparently we're speaking about covering a kli, which doesn't really constitute making an oil, because the gap within it is merely a container. He's not really creating a covered area. So therefore we have this difference between partial covering, which is mutar, but entirely covering does appear like he's creating a roofed area, and it's oil. Amar Papa, le'nehadik inshi, a person shouldn't tightly fasten tzinaisa, straw, wood chips, bepume de kuzni, into the mouth of a small container, the chavisa, in which they would, kuzna chavisa is a small container of a barrel, meaning they would take the wine and pour it into this small container, that's the kuzni. So you shouldn't place this straw, wood chips, fasten it tightly into the opening of the small container, and pour the wine through it. Mishum de mechzik mishameres, it appears like a strainer, so although it's not really so effective like a strainer, but it appears like so, and therefore he shouldn't do it. Continues the Gemara. Dvei Rav Papa, and the Homer of Papa was actually a beer brewer. Shaf, they would do the following. Shafu shichra mimana lamana. They would pour beer from one mana, from one container to the other container. And this way they would avoid the sediment found on the bottom of the container. So there's no concern of boirer, because the psoilet, the inedible portion, is not yet visible. He's only pouring the top portion of the liquid. He's not getting involved with the psoilet. There's no concern of boirer. What about the drippings on bottom, the liquid found on bottom by the psoilet? What happens when you get to there? So Ravina responded, Papa. This little bit of juice on the bottom in the house of Rav Papa loy chashivi. For them it wasn't considered to be significant. They would simply discard of it. They were beer makers, so it didn't have much value for them. So therefore, they never got involved with the remnants of the beer on bottom. They never got close to the psoiles, and therefore there was no concern of boirer. He can place an egg through a sifter, through this sifter containing mustard. Why? Tani Yaakov Kacha. Lefi shein oisen oise el legaven. Why do they place the egg into the sifter? The point really is that the egg, both parts of the egg, the white and the yellow, are fully edible. They're both considered to be oichel. They're two parts of an egg. The point was to have the yellow trickle through the pores of the sifter together with the mustard to add gavin, to add color to it. So the point here is not to separate oichel from psoilus. They're both considered to be oichel. Both parts of the egg are perfectly edible, fit for use. Simply two parts of the same item, food item. Therefore, there's no boirer. Boirer means removing good from bad, psoilus from oichel. They're both oichel. The point was simply to have the yellow go down with the mustard to add yellow pigment to it, and therefore there's no concern of boirer whatsoever. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began that the Puranas comes on account of the dayanim of Klal Yisrael who are corrupt. We learned about the three einshim that Hashem brings about because of the paying off and bribery of the shoftim, of the kahanim, of the neviim. We learned that tzion b'mishpati pada will be redeemed on account of true justice, and the yidden b'shaveh b'tzedakah on account of tzedakah. We learned that if the arrogant amongst us will cease, and the dayani sheker amongst us will cease, will be eliminated, then other types of things will stop befalling us. We discussed the authorities on account of the dayani sheker, the priests who incite us on account of the gasei ruach, the arrogant ones. We learned about refraining from all types of falsehood and corruption when it is found either by the Talmidei Chachamim who lend their support and authority to these incompetent or corrupt judges. We learned about the dayanim themselves who abuse their authority and are corrupt. We learned about the seifim, the scribes. We learned about the oicha dayanim, those who advise the litigants how to present their cases. We learned about the balei dinim themselves who present their arguments and case with falsehood and lying. We learned about brothers, Yosef and his brothers who refrained from wine. We learned about Aaron HaKohen who was so happy for Moshe Rabbeinu. We learned about the three halachas that the Bnei Bishkar sent to Levi, and the response was that for them everything is asur because we're concerned on account of the fact that they weren't Bnei Torah. But technically speaking, the Gemara told us there is a way to hang a canopy if it has that string attached to it. Kishos, hops, may indeed be planted in a kerem if it is in chutz la'aretz. According to one shita, you need to have a tinuk nachri do it for you. Bearing a mace on Yantiv, if it is on the first day of Yantiv, you can use a non-Jew. On the second day of Yantiv, even in Yisrael, even on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. We learned about 4 different scenarios of ha'arama employing a pretense. 2 cases are mutter for all people, hanging that strainer and first using it for pomegranates. Brewing beer on Yom Tov, even though he has a supply. We have 2 cases which were only allowed for the Talmud Chacham, which are borderline cases, in which case there's no clear and evident demonstration of legitimate intent. But remember, for Talmud Chacham, that's mutter, placing a piece of garlic to plug his barrel and pretend, say, well, I'm doing it simply to safeguard the garlic, to take a nap on a ferry, knowing full and well he's going to end up on the other side. We learned about wrapping oneself with a canopy material, even though there are those straps hanging from it which are batal to the canopy because they're perfectly usable and functional when the canopy is in use. Although presently he's not making use of these straps, they're considered to be subordinate to the canopy. They're not a masoi, as opposed to the invalid tzitzis, the partial tzitzis, which are hanging off his talus. Only 3 out of 4 corners have tzitzis, in which case they're not kosher. We regard that as a masoi, as a load, because they're awaiting completion. And since at the moment they're inherently dysfunctional and they're chashiv, nevertheless they're considered to be a masoi, a load, and if one wears this on Shabbos, he's chayiv chatas. We have in our Mishnah that one may pour the mayim, clear water, onto shmarim found in a strainer. There's no concern of bird there. He's simply bringing about he's causing a mixture to happen and then have that mixture drain itself out. We learned about 3 categories of wine with regard to straining it. If it's something which will be drunk by most people, for instance, clear water, clear wine, which has just a little bit of sediment mixed in, or even if it has more sediment, if it's a bit cloudy, but it's at the point in the season where people don't hesitate to drink this type of wine, then it is mutter even to put it through an ordinary strainer. There's no concern of burr. If this wine is somewhat cloudy, and is usually something most people will not drink, and it is not during the wine crushing season, one can go ahead and strain it, but only derech shina, because this is an issa d'rabbanan, which they allowed if it is done in a non-conventional manner. For instance, putting it through material, through a basket. Whereas if it's yayin achurin legamri, completely cloudy, in which case nobody gets close to it, it's considered to be inedible, undrinkable. In this case, separating the good from bad involves a melacha of boirer. Therefore, you cannot do it even derech shina. We concluded with the halacha of placing the egg inside the strainer, in which case he's simply separating one portion of the food from the other, which does not involve boirer, and therefore it's mutter.